Looking at the first one where the water turned to blood. And if you take this back to the Hebrew and you begin to look at the way he chooses to describe these judgments, you'll see that it's a message that he's sending to his people, to his house. It's a wake-up call, if you will. We've just looked at wake-up call number 1, and now we're going to look at the second one that he sends to his people, the judgment of frogs. In Exodus chapter 8, starting in verse 2, we had just began to read about how it describes these frogs and where they were located, that they came into the bedchamber and upon the bed, and they were in the ovens and in the kneading troughs. And if you go on in verse 5, it lists that they came out of the streams and the rivers and over the ponds, and they came and they covered the land of Egypt. Before we look at this plague, however, first and foremost, is there a connection to the bride? Is this truly a message that he is sending to her? We were able to prove it when we looked at the water turning to blood. Well, can we see a connection here as well? Is there a clue that he provides for you, letting you know that he's speaking to his people? Well, you'll find it in the term frogs. The word frogs is Strong's number 6854, Zephardia. It means frogs. It comes from the root number 6852, Safar, which means to go early or to depart early. It happens to be the root of the name Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, the one from whom living water is drawn. She becomes a shadow picture of the bride of Messiah, just like Leah was. What aspect are we being shown of this bride? In Leah, we've seen one that had deaf ears, and so the harvest became grievous, and it was vexing unto her because of things within her that she refused to deal with. Well, within this name Zipporah, there's the root to go early or to depart early. He now speaks to a bride who thinks she's going to get out of here early, one who thinks she's going to get out of here before she's made to listen to Yahweh. And he lets her know that that's not going to be the case at all. Here's the message that he sends to this one. If you break down this word Sephardia, frogs, you have the letter Zadi, which is the picture of the fishing hook or the bird trap. It comes from the root word meaning to hunt, to capture, or to catch. The next two letters are the pei and the resh, which actually form a word within the Hebrew. That's the word par, Strong's number 6499. It means bull. It's also the two-letter root of Pharaoh within Hebrew, whose symbol was the bull, or Apis, the supreme god of Egypt. Then you have the letter Dalet and the letter Ayin, also making a word in the Hebrew. Strong's number 1843, Dia. It means knowledge. In other words, the bride is being judged because she has been captured by the knowledge of the bull, by the knowledge of Pharaoh, and she's not going anywhere until this is dealt with. She doesn't get to leave Egypt as long as she has been intimate with another god, as long as she has allowed herself to be intimate with Pharaoh in the place of Yahweh. She doesn't get to get out early until this gets cleaned up and this gets dealt with. This is a knowledge that entered into the bedchambers and upon the bed, because this is where the judgment goes. Pharaoh has replaced Yahweh within the intimate place. And this judgment now falls, closing this door to him. It also went into the ovens. The word ovens in Hebrew is Strong's number 8574, tanur. It means a furnace, an oven, a fire pot, or a stove. It comes from the root number 5216, near, which means lamp. It's also used to describe the menorah, this term near, the lampstand. Once again, he shows you a counterfeit version has replaced the real deal. They're not looking to the word, to the light of Yahweh. Instead, they've accepted this false light. With each judgment being upon a particular god of Egypt, we looked at how the first was against the Nile River, representing the womb. So let's look at what God is represented by this judgment. It's interesting to note that the god associated with frogs was a frog-headed goddess named Heket. She was the goddess of childbirth. And frogs were used within Egypt to ensure fertility, and the midwives were called servants of Heket. First, you see Yahweh closing the womb of the adulterous bride, and now he takes the next step in this process of cleaning her up. He judges the fruit that has been born of this relationship, and he closes the door to this other husband that has been allowed access. Understanding this, that the midwives were called servants of Heket, they were responsible for carrying on this seed and this knowledge of Pharaoh. This adds even greater significance then to the fact that we are given two names of the midwives in Exodus chapter 1. Shiphrah and Puah are spoken of there. But there's a statement made about these midwives. It says that they feared Yahweh. That word feared is Strong's number 3372, yareh, which means to fear, to revere, or to be afraid. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, the statement is made, the fear, the yareh of Yahweh, is the beginning of knowledge. In other words, they had knowledge of Yahweh, not of Pharaoh. There was still a remnant in Egypt that hadn't allowed themselves to be compromised by this knowledge of Pharaoh. And these two individuals were those that kept it pure. They were the ones that carried on the seed of Yahweh, his words. They were the ones that had hearing ears. They didn't allow themselves to be compromised by this Pharaoh. And because of this knowledge, because they feared Yahweh, the statement is made in Exodus chapter 1, verse 17, that they saved the men children alive. The word saved and the word alive is the same term in Hebrew. It's Strong's number 2421, hayah. It means to live, to have life, or to be restored to life. It happens to be a cognate or a related word of number 2331, chavah, which means to breathe, to tell, to declare, to show, or to make known. It's the name Eve. In other words, when we begin to tie this together, we understand that the knowledge of Yahweh is what breathes life and restores his bride, Eve, Chavah, and makes her known. It's what makes her distinct and set apart from all others. It points us back to the term that we looked at earlier, that word anguish. Why Israel didn't listen. When they refused to listen, when they refused to partake of the knowledge of Yahweh, he had to judge them. Because it was only when they agreed to listen to him and when they would accept the knowledge of Yahweh that they could be set apart, that they could be restored, that he could breathe into them again, and they could truly become Eve, his bride within the earth. Now, when the frogs die, we are told in Exodus chapter 8, verse 14, a statement is made of how they deal with these frogs. It says, and they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. The word heaps is Strong's number 2563, chomer. It means cement, mortar, clay, or heap. But it comes from the root number 2560, chamar, which means to boil, to foam, to ferment, or to be reddened. It's a very similar description to the first judgment that fell upon Egypt when the water turned to blood. A very accurate description would be that it was reddened. And it ties together the facts for you as he begins to give these messages to his people. He links them together. He tells you that the womb of the bride was judged because of this one right here, because of the knowledge of Pharaoh, the knowledge of this other God that was put in the stead of Yahweh. The same concept is alluded to in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 in verse 3. It says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through Yahweh to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of Yahweh, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Messiah. It's interesting that he chooses the terminology, the pulling down of strongholds here in 2 Corinthians, because Egypt means the place of the double stronghold. It ties together that how you're going to get out of Egypt is by casting down this other knowledge that this was a judgment against, this knowledge of these other Elohim. If you plan on coming out of bondage, you must first deal with the seed that has been planted within your life. You must first cut this off. Then you'll be able to pull down the stronghold. Then you'll be able to get out of Egypt. The next judgment that falls upon both Israel and Egypt alike is the judgment of lice. In Exodus chapter 8, starting in verse 16, he tells us, "And Yahweh said unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt." We need to tie this to the other two messages if this is truly what Yahweh is attempting to reveal to us within the scripture. So first, let's look at who this judgment affected, because this will be the link within these messages that ties them together. This is the connector. We are told that they fell and that this affected man and beast. The word man here is Strong's number 120, Adam. It means man or mankind. It comes from the root number 119, which means to be red or to be ruddy. And within this term Adam, upon the end you have the word dam, which means blood. It connects for you, this term Adam, the fact that this is coming right on the heels of these other two judgments that have already fallen. And it's once again emphasizing the fact that the bride is unclean. She is nidah, in a nidah condition here within Egypt. The next thing that it affected, it was in man and in beast. The word beast is Strong's number 929, behema. It means beast, cattle, or animal. It is often used to refer to cattle. It connects for you the reason why Israel is in this condition: the worship of the bull, the worship of Apis, or the worship of Pharaoh. But it also gives you insight into why we today are in this condition as well, because we have worshiped a bull as well. The bull market within this country is now beginning to be judged as well. This judgment came from the dust of the earth. The word dust is Strong's number 6083, afar. It means dry earth, dust, powder, or ashes. But it's a very significant term because it points you back to an earlier set of events that is very important for them here in Egypt. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, the serpent is told, "Dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life." Why is it important that he's going to eat dust? What is this dust? In Genesis 3:19, Adam is told by Yahweh, "For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." The dead seed, Adam without the light of Yahweh within him, he becomes dust as well. And this is what the serpent shall eat. He becomes prey to the serpent. And here in Egypt, this particular judgment comes from this dust, representing the dead seed. From the dust came the lice. Strong's number 3654. It's the word kin. It translates as meaning gnat. But there's another word in the Hebrew that's spelled the same way. They're related words. They're cognates. Strong's number 3651, kin as well. This word is an adverb that's used to convey cause and effect. In other words, the effect of this relationship that they've had here in Egypt is them returning to the dust, just like Adam and Eve. They as well have become the dead seed. The last judgment that Yahweh chooses to send upon Israel before he makes the distinction between Israel and Egypt is one that reveals the consequences of their sin. The same consequences are there for us as well if we continue to not listen, if we continue to be involved with these other husbands and not listen to the messages that Yahweh is sending our way. This particular judgment, there's a statement made by the magicians in Egypt. In Exodus chapter 8, verse 19, they make the statement, "Then the magicians said unto Pharaoh, This is the finger of Elohim." That word finger is Strong's number 676, etzbah. It means finger or toe. The first time this word is used in Scripture is right here when they make this statement that this judgment right here was the finger of Elohim. This is important because the finger,